On my 16th birthday, the sky over Columbus, Ohio felt like it was falling apart, thunder rolling through every cracked window of the house I had lived in my entire life. And while most kids my age were cutting cakes with friends or opening gifts wrapped with glittery paper, I was standing barefoot on the living room rug, clutching a stale gas station muffin someone pretended was a birthday treat. My name is Riley Sullivan, and that was the day everything I thought I understood about family collapsed in one clean, merciless moment. My father swung open the front door, rain slicing past him like needles, and without even meeting my eyes he muttered, "You're 16 now. Time to stop being our burden, move out." Behind him, my stepmother leaned against the doorway with an expression colder than the wet November wind, and my half-sister, only 14 but already cruel in ways kids shouldn't be, snickered loudly about how the house might finally stop smelling like trash. There wasn't a fight, no final plea, not even a fake hug. They just pushed a black trash bag of my belongings into my hands and closed the door so hard the porch light flickered. I wandered through the streets until my socks squished with rainwater, slept under bus stop roofs when police cruisers passed, and learned quickly which shelters wouldn't let teenagers in without paperwork, which diners left leftovers near the dumpsters before opening, how to keep my face down and my voice steady so no one would look too closely at me. Weeks later, half frozen behind a Tim Hortons at sunrise while digging through garbage for anything wrapped in plastic, I heard tires crunching gravel and turned to see a black SUV glide to a stop. A tall man in a dark overcoat stepped into the rain without hesitation, calling me by my full name as if he'd known me forever. I tensed, ready to run, but he didn't react to the smell of old sweat or the dirt on my face. Instead, he introduced himself as Lawrence Hargrove and told me my great-aunt, a woman I'd never even heard of, had died and left her entire estate to me under one strict condition I had to agree to on the spot. Something in my brain cracked, the part that believed nobody would ever choose me for anything, and yet I still slid into the warm SUV, shivering as heat thawed the stiffness in my fingers. He drove us to a silent diner where he placed a leather folder in front of me containing a single photograph of an elderly woman with glacier blue eyes sitting on a porch swing overlooking the Cincinnati skyline. Her name was Beatrice Whitford, my mother's aunt, a powerhouse who built a steel manufacturing company from nothing, selling it decades later for more than $50 million, money she set aside for one heir, me. But there was a deadline, 72 hours from the moment he notified me, or the entire fortune would be donated to a foundation for homeless youth. No appeals, no excuses. As the jet fueled at Rickenbacker, I showered for the first time in weeks inside the private terminal's bathroom, scrubbing away grime while trying to believe that this was actually happening. On the plane, he handed me a binder with a handwritten letter from Beatrice explaining she once been thrown out at 17 when she became pregnant and had sworn if she ever made it out alive, she'd give someone else the chance she never got. The jet descended toward Cincinnati's pink morning sky as something heavy and electric settled in my chest, fear mixed with hope, maybe both. At the estate, inside a study filled with the scent of lemon oil and old paper, a video played of Beatrice in her last days, explaining the terms. The trust, worth over $50 million, would unlock fully only if I personally ensured at least 80 homeless kids received real housing, real education, real second chances within the next 5 years. If I failed, every cent went to charity. My father and his wife were explicitly cut out. She told me to choose, let pain fester or turn it into something unbreakable. I signed without hesitation. 5 years later, I had built a network of group homes, apartments, and emergency placements across Cincinnati and northern Kentucky, and kids who'd once been living out of backpacks were now graduating, working, breathing again. My right hand, Levi Ortiz, whom I'd met under the bridge when he was 15 with a broken arm and a backpack full of overdue library books, now ran operations with a calm strength that made people listen. We had placed 79 kids. One more, and the entire trust would be fully mine to use for expansions that could change the city. That was the exact moment the past I thought I had buried clawed its way back. A call from Lawrence saying my father had terminal lung cancer, no insurance, crushing debt, and that he and my half-sister were standing in the lobby begging to see me. I walked to the window overlooking the street and saw them, my father shrunken and grey, coughing blood into a handkerchief, and my half-sister twitching from drug use, packing like a trapped animal. Security was ready to escort them away, but something deeper in me, the part forged under cold bridges, said to let them in. I led them upstairs without a word. They begged, blamed, cried, demanded. I didn't raise my voice once. I handed them folders with hospice options, Medicaid approvals, addiction treatment centers for adults, and shelters that accepted women with substance abuse histories. I told them our organization served minors only and that nothing had changed the day they threw me out. It was still written in ink. I sent them away. That same night, a 15-year-old girl named Destiny texted our crisis line from a toxic home, and within an hour she had a warm bed and safety. I wrote her name on the board as number 80. When the clock hit 12:01 a.m., the trust unlocked. And standing alone on the warehouse rooftop, overlooking the river that watched my great-aunt rise from exile to empire, I finally understood the choice she'd given me. Some doors are meant to close forever, but some open so wide they pull entire generations through them. And I was done looking back at the ones that slammed shut on my 16th birthday. I kept walking even when every step felt like I was dragging the weight of my own broken past behind me, because stopping meant sinking, and I had already sunk enough times to know that once you fall too deep, climbing back up becomes a battle against your own mind, a war nobody else sees or understands. And maybe that's why I stopped explaining myself to people, because they only hear what fits their comfort and ignore everything that makes them uncomfortable. So I carried my truth silently, letting the world think whatever it wanted, while inside me a slow-burning fire kept reminding me that I was still here, still breathing. Still trying to rebuild something out of the ruins left behind by people who swore they would never hurt me, but didn't even hesitate when the moment came. There were nights when the silence felt so thick that it almost pressed against my skin like a weight I couldn't escape. Nights where I stared at the ceiling trying to understand how love could turn into betrayal so easily, how trust could turn into poison, how familiar faces could become the sharpest knives without even changing their expressions. And as I lay there, swallowing the ache that kept rising in my throat, I realized that healing doesn't come from pretending nothing happened. It comes from accepting that everything happened, that every wound is real, every scar has a story, and every broken piece carries the memory of a moment you survived when you didn't think you would. So I started collecting those pieces slowly, not because I wanted to be whole again. Maybe wholeness is overrated. But because I wanted to understand myself without the noise of other people's expectations, without the fear of disappointing someone who never truly cared, without the pressure of staying strong for people who would vanish the moment I needed them. And somewhere in that process, somewhere between the days that felt too long and the nights that felt too short, I began noticing small changes in myself. The way my heartbeat didn't race anymore when I remembered what happened, the way my hands didn't shake when I passed the places that once haunted me, the way my voice didn't break when I spoke about the things that used to choke me. I was still hurting, yes, but the pain was no longer controlling me. It was simply there like a reminder of what I had survived, a reminder of the person I used to be and the person I was slowly becoming. And maybe that's what healing really is, not the absence of pain, but the ability to move forward with it, to breathe through it, to exist despite it, to keep choosing yourself again and again, even when choosing yourself feels wrong, because you spent years putting everyone else before you. I knew I would never be the same. I knew the old version of me was gone forever, but maybe that wasn't a tragedy. Maybe it was the first time in my life that something breaking actually saved me, because the pieces that remained were stronger, sharper, wiser, and they no longer fit into the places I used to stay, the people I used to cling to, the love I used to fight for. And as I walked further away from who I was, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. A strange, unfamiliar sense of freedom, like the air finally tasted different, lighter, cleaner, as if the universe had quietly opened a door I never noticed before, and even though I didn't know where it would lead, I stepped through it anyway, because staying where I was had already cost me enough, and I refused to let the same pain define the rest of my life. And the further I moved into this new version of my life, the more I realized that the people I lost along the way were not accidents or tragedies. They were lessons, heavy ones, painful ones, but necessary in ways I couldn't understand back then. Because if they had stayed, I would have kept shrinking myself to fit into the spaces they allowed me, kept dimming my own light so they wouldn't feel threatened, kept breaking myself into smaller pieces hoping they would finally see my worth. But people who want to break you will never acknowledge the parts of you that shine. They only look for the parts they can control. And once they lose that control, they leave, blaming you for their exit as if your healing was the problem, not their presence. And as I walked deeper into the silence of my new reality, I started hearing things I never noticed before, like the sound of my own thoughts untangling slowly, like the quiet understanding that not everyone you lose is meant to be mourned, like the strange comfort of knowing that some endings are blessings disguised as heartbreaks. And though it took me time to accept it, I began to understand that people don't always leave because you weren't enough. Sometimes they leave because they know they can't use you anymore, and their departure is simply the moment you stop being their convenience. There were days I woke up feeling heavier than the night before, carrying the weight of memories that refused to fade. But even on those days, I kept going, kept getting up, kept breathing through the ache that tried to pull me back, because I had learned the hard way that staying stuck hurts far more than letting go. And no matter how familiar the pain becomes, it is still pain, and it still steals pieces of you each time you choose it over freedom. I began setting boundaries without apologizing, speaking up without fear, saying no without guilt, and every time I did, I felt pieces of my old self dying. Pieces that were never meant to stay, pieces shaped by people who benefited from my silence, pieces molded by guilt that was never mine to carry. And the more I shed those pieces, the lighter I felt, as if I had been holding my breath for years and finally learned how to exhale without trembling, learned how to exist without needing someone to tell me I deserved to. I started rebuilding my life in ways that made sense to me, not in ways that kept others comfortable, and slowly I began seeing small signs of progress. Quiet mornings that didn't hurt as much, nights where sleep came without a fight, moments where I looked in the mirror and didn't see a stranger staring back. I wasn't healed, not even close, but I was becoming someone I could respect again, someone who didn't chase after people who walked away, someone who didn't beg for the love that should have been given freely, someone who didn't break just because someone else couldn't handle their own emptiness. And in that messy, imperfect journey, I found a truth I wish I had known earlier. You don't grow by fixing the people who hurt you, you grow by fixing the part of yourself that allowed them to hurt you repeatedly. So I kept walking forward, not to prove anything to anyone, but because going back meant returning to a version of myself that no longer existed, a version that had been washed away by every tear, every disappointment, every night I spent fighting demons nobody else knew about. And now, even when loneliness sits beside me, even when the past tries to whisper its way back into my mind, I don't collapse the way I used to, because I finally understand that strength isn't loud, it isn't dramatic. It's quiet, steady, a slow rising after every fall, and for the first time in my life I'm rising for myself, not for the people who once broke me, not for the ones who left without looking back, but for the person I am still becoming, piece by piece. Breath by breath, day by day. And as I kept pushing myself forward, something strange began happening inside me, something I never expected after everything I had lost. After all the nights spent drowning in memories that refused to loosen their grip. It was as if the universe was slowly rearranging pieces of my life without asking for my permission, pulling me toward people I never thought I'd meet and moments I never believed I'd deserve. But even then, even as new doors cautiously opened, a part of me held back, afraid that every good thing would be temporary, that every warm moment would be followed by another cold betrayal. Because when you've spent years learning that love comes with conditions and kindness comes with hidden motives, trust doesn't grow easily. It grows like a fragile plant in dry soil, surviving only because something inside it refuses to die. So I stayed guarded, kept my distance, moved with caution, not because I didn't want to feel again, but because I knew too well what it cost to feel deeply, to care honestly, to open the parts of yourself that took years to stitch back together. And yet, despite all my fears, despite the cracks that still ached whenever the past whispered too loudly, I started noticing subtle shifts in myself, small moments where I let the sun touch my face without flinching, moments where I laughed without forcing it, moments where the world didn't seem like a battlefield and my heart didn't feel like an open wound waiting for the next hit. Healing didn't happen dramatically, it happened quietly, like a slow sunrise that takes its time to break through the darkness, and though the night inside me wasn't gone, it was no longer suffocating me the way it once did. I learned to sit with my pain without letting it devour me, learned to breathe even when memories tightened around my chest, learned to choose myself even when old habits tried to pull me back into the same patterns that once destroyed me. And with each passing day, I found myself growing a little more, not in the loud, triumphant way people expect, but in small, almost invisible ways. Like the way my voice didn't shake during difficult conversations, or the way I walked into new rooms without shrinking, or the way I stopped apologizing for things that were never my fault. And maybe that's what real strength looks like. Not being unbreakable, but breaking again and again, and still finding a way to rebuild without losing your softness. Your hope, your ability to feel deeply even when the world tries to harden you. I realized that if people could walk away from me so easily, then they were never meant to stay in the parts of my story that mattered. And if life had taken so much from me, maybe it was making space for something greater, something I couldn't see yet but could feel approaching like distant thunder. A quiet promise that there are still moments worth living for, still memories waiting to be made, still chapters I haven't written yet. And even though I still carry scars that ache on certain nights, scars that remind me of who I used to be and everything I had to survive to reach this point, I no longer see them as weaknesses. I see them as proof that I didn't give up, that life tried to break me but failed, that every time I was pushed to the edge, I learned how to build wings out of my own shattered pieces. I don't know what tomorrow holds, I don't know where this path will take me, but for the first time in a long time, I'm not afraid of the unknown. I'm not afraid of starting again, not afraid of loving again, not afraid of trusting myself to walk through whatever comes next. Because now I know that even if everything falls apart again, even if the world shatters in ways I can't predict, I will rise again, not because I'm fearless, but because I've learned how to rise with fear still inside me, learned how to move even when my legs shake, learned how to hope even when my heart is tired. And maybe, just maybe, that's enough to begin again. And even as I move forward, there are moments when the past tries to pull me back like a familiar shadow, whispering reminders of everything I once lost, everything I once begged for, everything I once believed would last forever. And in those moments I feel a quiet shiver inside me, not out of fear but out of recognition, because I'm no longer the person who used to collapse at the first sign of loneliness or crumble at the slightest disappointment. I've learned how to stand even when the ground shakes, learned how to breathe even when memories press against my chest, learned how to hold myself together without expecting anyone else to do it for me. And maybe that's what growth truly is, not a sudden transformation but a slow acceptance that some people can only meet you at the depth they've reached within themselves. And if they've never learned how to love honestly, then it was never your role to teach them at the cost of your own sanity. I look at life differently now, not as something that owes me explanations, but as something that moves in ways I don't always understand, sometimes tearing things down to protect me, sometimes removing people I was too afraid to let go of, sometimes forcing endings so I can finally begin again. And with each day that passes, I feel myself becoming lighter, not because the pain is gone, but because I'm no longer carrying it the way I used to. I'm no longer trying to fix every broken thing, no longer gripping tightly onto memories that were meant to fade, no longer chasing the versions of people that existed only in my imagination. I've learned that healing isn't about forgetting, it's about refusing to let the past dictate who you become. So now, when I think about everything I survived, the broken trust, the silent heartbreaks, the disappointments that left me staring at my own reflection wondering what made me so easy to leave, I don't feel anger anymore, I feel clarity. I feel a strange sense of peace knowing that all those moments shaped me into someone who no longer bends for people who take without giving, who no longer breaks just to keep someone else whole, who no longer apologizes for existing. And maybe the best part of it all is that I finally understand that not every ending is a loss. Some endings are esker.